When the topic of evolution comes up, some actual opponents of evolution bring up the topic of the eye, especially the human eye. The eye, they claim, is so complex that it just couldn't have happened by accident. Instead, the nature and the complexity of design would require a designer to actually come up with the plans for the eye, sometimes referred to as a divine watchmaker. Now, whether this is some divine being or some ancient alien, these people miss out on some of the key points of evolution, whether it's deliberately or through ignorance, may be down to the individuals involved. So not only could evolution create an eye, we can still see that process in action today. The evidence is out there in plain sight. People want to just go and look for it. Now, evolution has two major factors working for it: time and billions of test subjects carrying out the experiment. The benefit of these millions of years, there's an ancient saying which is relevant to the subject of evolution and the eye, which is, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." The meaning here is that to be successful in evolutionary terms, the eye doesn't need to be perfect first time. Instead, just like the one-eyed man, the eyesight only needs to be slightly better than all of those around them. And then the one-eyed man will have a significant advantage. And for the origins of the first eye, we need to go back over 500 million years. This time, remember, there were no animals that could see, so everything was blind. And multicellular life had emerged, and were animals that ate other animals, they had a major problem. The only way they could hunt was to bumble around and hope they bumped into something and then attempt to eat it before it ate them. This, of course, was an extremely risky business, so any advantage here would be a huge advantage and step forward. These early creatures didn't evolve an eye as such straight from scratch. Instead, they developed a protein called rhodopsin, which can respond to light. On its own, this couldn't create much of an image of the surroundings. Initially, all it could do was respond to light and dark areas of the sea where it lived. Even this vague awareness of the surroundings was superior to all the other animals around it. So, like the one-eyed man, rhodopsin made the animal a king. Evolution, of course, then doesn't sit still. There's constant pressure to change and improve the basic function of rhodopsin. Next came specialist cells working in coordination with each other to piece together a better idea of their surroundings and put together those light and dark areas to form some kind of map around the world around them. At this stage, we're still far away from any recognizable eye as such, but the beginnings are there. With a lot more time, these first shapes of light and dark were being perceived by these early animals, were eventually being able to be sharpened and made less fuzzy. As this happened, the animals could then, for the first time, clearly identify which shapes were the rocks and which were their prey, and even which animals were their own species. It made sexual reproduction so much easier. All these were key advantages, so the animals passed on their genes for better eyesight to the next generation. Over millions of years, subsequent generations made tiny improvements to the rudimentary eye, until a vast multitude of different eyes adapted to different circumstances had been developed. Now, the idea of the human eye being designed is flawed, since evolution doesn't actually produce a perfect solution to problems. Instead, it produces a solution which is good enough, based on a series of gradual improvements on what has gone before. If the designer had been creating the human eye, they would have probably come up with a far better design. The human eye, for an engineering point, is a flawed article. Human eyes are vulnerable to damage, difficult for the body to repair. Evolution has created features like eyebrow ridges and eyelashes to protect the eye, but the eye is still very vulnerable to injury. The eye is flawed in other ways. Some people are short-sighted or develop floaters in the eye, both of which can impair vision. There are more serious problems of glaucoma, cataracts, or infections like bilharzia, all of which the human eye has little defense to. The human eye is adapted to the environment which we were involved in. Unlike some other animals, we see poorly in darkness or in other challenging situations. So there are cats, raccoons, sharks, and crocodiles, among many other animals which have a reflective coating on the back of their eyes, which bounces some of their light back through the eye, giving the light a second chance of responding to that light. Now, this is a key evolutionary advantage for animals that are active at night or who swim in muddy water where visibility is reduced. So animals like the ones I mentioned have an advantage in evolving that feature, which is absent in the human eye, so we're largely inactive during night, preferring to sleep during the night time. This feature is only one of many that some animals have evolved that humans haven't developed. For instance, there are animals that can see in the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. Key amongst these are the pollinating insects, where flowers can use ultraviolet colours to direct insects straight to the pollen. Also, there's some large animals like reindeer that can see in ultraviolet. It may help them see in snowy conditions. They may be able to identify plants which are actually buried under the snow to be invisible with normal human eyesight. Then there are snakes, which have developed a special kind of extra eye. Alongside the standard eyes, snakes have developed a pit organ, which enables them to perceive the infrared part of the spectrum. But even when it's completely dark, they can detect small mammals by the heat they give off, which again gives the snakes a substantial survival advantage. Now, some evolutionary advantages can even be disposed of once they're no longer an actual advantage. So, for instance, some animals, especially birds and reptiles, and even a few mammals, have what's known as a nictating membrane. The membrane is kind of a form of a third eyelid, where it can be drawn across the eye to protect it from damage or to aid in moisturizing the eye, while at the same time being still transparent enough to enable partial vision. Humans have the remains of the membrane in the vestigial form in the corner of the eye near the nose, something that should not actually be present if the eye was designed by some form of creator. The only reason for it to be present is it's an earlier evolutionary adaptation which is no longer required, much like the human remnants of a tail. But one evolutionary advantage the human eye does have, which is rather rare in the animal kingdom as a whole, and that's the ability to see in all the colours of the visible spectrum of light. This adaptation of the human eye to see the full range of colours has required much of the eye to be actually turned over to registering those colours. As a result, the human eye sees fairly poorly, as compared to some other animals, when low light conditions like dusk and dawn, which is when many predator-prey interactions occurs. So for many other animals, seeing colour would be a major disadvantage. However, for humans, since few animals actually seek this out as prey during dim light, the advantages for colour vision enables us to notice the colour changing on fruit as they ripen, making gathering fruit from trees a much more efficient process. In addition, colour vision can also enable us to bypass the camouflage attempts of some animals, which tend to rely on other animals not having colour vision. Again, their camouflage evolved to be good enough rather than be perfect. So there we have the human eye. Not a perfect organ designed by a creator, but a functional organ which is adapted to the world humans evolved to live in, and an eye which is able to make the best use of our biological position in the ecosystem. While it would be fun for the human eye to have the adaptations of other animals, those features wouldn't give us an evolutionary advantage, so there's no biological pressure for humans to develop or keep those features. We are left with a functional but not perfect human eye. Now, the final thing about eyes and evolution is they haven't just evolved on a single occasion. Instead, not only have they evolved on multiple different occasions, it is still happening today. So you can see animals in all the various different stages of development I mentioned earlier on in this video. So they're still going through the process of evolving eyes in an attempt to cope with the generally sighted world around them.